we're live. I'm telling your followers you're online. Right. Hello everybody. How you all doing? So we'll just give another couple of minutes or another 30 seconds or so, let some other people join, and then we will get started. So hope you're really well. Hope everyone is safe and staying fit and staying healthy and doing as much training as you can. But at the end of the day, being safe and being sensible. Right, so we've got some people on now, so we will start. So everybody, welcome to the Sports Shoes No Fun Standing Still series, where myself, Tom Evans, and my partner Sophie Coldwell are going to be taking you through our top recovery tips for post-training. This is obviously a huge part of our lives and the lives of any athlete or recreational runner, triathlete, swimmer. Recovery is such a huge part of performance and can sometimes be really overlooked. So what we'll do today is we're going to share some of our top tips that hopefully you can implement some of them. Also, for the best question from this series, you have the chance of winning a Theragun Pro. This is a product that we'll talk a little bit about later, but it's something that we've both been using for the last month and have found that it's absolutely amazing for recovery. So a little bit about ourselves. So my name's Tom Evans. I'm a professional ultra-distance trail runner. I started running in 2017 in a race called Marathon des Sables. From then I've gone on to race CCC at UTMB, Western States, and also on the road, and recently at the European Cross Country Championships last year. So a bit of everything. And I'll pass you over to Soph, and she'll tell you a little bit about her.
So yeah, Sophie Coldwell, GB triathlete, been a member of the World Class programme for a number of years now, represented Team England at Commonwealth Games, and have been fortunate enough to pick up some medals at European and World Championships. So as Tom said, we're going to roll you through our recovery routine, and for us this pretty much starts when we walk through the door, especially from a key session. We're going to talk a bit about nutrition to start with. For us, that is the one thing that we try and nail as soon as we walk through the door. You kind of have a 10-15 minute window that is the vital point to get the right nutrition in. So for us, we tend to use smoothies and shakes. We just use a really simple protein powder. We make that into a recovery shake with milk, obviously great. Calcium for your bones. We add in some frozen fruit. Frozen berries are a great antioxidant, and when you put your body under loads of stress, you need that to help you to recover. Handful of oats, again, great source of energy to restore your glycogen stores, and then add in some protein to get the muscle starting to rebuild. And another key point to recovery is hydration. So we tend to use some hydration tabs. There's loads of flavours from loads of different brands out there. So yeah, we always try and get a bottle of Hydro Tab fluid in when we finish training. You'd be surprised how much you do sweat out, especially in this heat. So keeping on top of hydration is super key. So that's where we start.
Yeah, so Sophie's giving you a little insight about the nutrition. What we're going to go on to now is show you a little bit of our key tips, focusing on certain body parts. For me as a trail runner, and then for Soph as a triathlete. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the Theragun, and I'm going to use it on my calves. So what I've found is when I'm running on the trails and I'm doing lots of hill work, which I do in some specific build-up, so for a race, anything like UTMB or anything like that where there's lots of climbing, my calves get really tired. So fortunate enough to have the new Theragun Pro. I find it's absolutely awesome, an amazing bit of kit. I had one a while ago, but have now just got the new one, and it's brilliant. So for the calves, if I've been doing a hill session or working particularly hard on the trails, then I found this is such a great tool. I also used it before, but yes, we're focused on running, and if you've got any other questions about this afterwards, just slide in, just ping any of us an email or a DM and we'll get back to you. But yeah, so what I will do is super easy to use. Once I've turned it on, select the setting that I'll use. I'll just show you quickly about how you'd use it, but typically I'd use 60 seconds going up and down the main belly of the calf, and then make sure I do it on both legs. So I won't do it the whole thing now, but just to show you, give you a little bit of a demonstration of how I would use it for recovery. Yeah, so just a nice fluid motion, just going up and down the main belly of the calf, like I said, and about 60 seconds on both sides. For me, for the recovery for this, firstly it feels great, it feels like you're getting a massage, and certainly during lockdown when things like massage and physio hasn't been accessible, it's just been really valuable as it feels like you're having a massage and it feels great, and it's certainly in a period like this we've been trying to keep things as normal as possible. And secondly, the thing that I find is super useful for it is it increases the blood flow to that area. So what that's doing is it's flushing out all of the waste products, the lactic acid, the carbon monoxide, the byproduct of exercise, and it's allowing the reoxygenation. So the oxygen that you're breathing in, going into your lungs, and then being pushed out through your heart, bringing in more oxygen into those muscle parts, into those muscle groups that then help you to recover, because that's what we want to do. We want to recover as well as possible. So once I've done that, then I'm going to move on to just a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of a calf stretch. So for this, you just need one bit of equipment. You can do it slightly differently. You can do a knee to wall, but what I like to use, I like to use a big, thick band and then a bit of an anchor point. So we're lucky enough we've got this squat rack that we can use it on. But what you do is put your foot in through the bottom of it, step forward just to take some tension, and then from there you're just doing a very simple, just bending your knee on the same leg that the band is around, making sure you keep your knee as straight as you can, and just really getting a good stretch in that front leg. But what this is doing, what the band's doing, is it's putting the bones back just to allow your ankle to move properly and to get the best possible stretch on as much of the calf as possible. Rep-wise for this, I tend to do somewhere between 20 and 30 reps on each leg, 2 or 3 times through, depending on how tight my calves are. So once that's done, I'll then swap legs and do it on the other side. What you can do, which is a really good idea, so maybe you do it every couple of weeks, is do a knee to wall test. So what you would do is you pop a line on the floor and you'd see how far you can get away from the wall. So if the wall was in front of you, you'd see how far you can bend in. As soon as your knee touches the wall, take a little step back and then do it again and then keep going. And if you can take measurements like that, then if you're getting a bit tighter or a little bit sore in an area, then you've got something to work off when you're going through that. And once you've done that, if your calves are still a little bit sore, a little bit tight or tender, you can then go back over with the derriere. And that's finishing calves. So just a bit of a recap for that. On the trails, certainly when I'm climbing, it was my calves that go first, so I find a good calf routine is probably one of my more regular flexibility and recovery exercises. And I'm now going to pass you back over to Sophie, who is going to talk through the next body part.
Okay, so for me as a triathlete, 99% of the stuff, especially during lockdown, goes through my quads. I have been doing a lot on the turbo recently. I'm sure, like many other triathletes that have been locked down, have been trying to complete 𝐬𝐡𝐞𝐫. So yeah, being on the turbo more and just generally more riding and running because we obviously haven't been swimming. And for me, like I say, that goes a lot through my quads, also through my hip flexors. Obviously cycling, you're in that hunched over position and your hips are quite closed off. So I really like to use the band just like Tom does for his ankles, but as a distraction stretch for hip flexors. So similarly again, you just take the band and put it up into your top of your leg into your hip flexor, and then I just lean into that and make sure there's enough tension on the band so that it distracts the head of the femur out of the hip. And then with that, once you kind of feel like you've got on top of that, you can just add in an arm over the top of the head and it just stretches out all down the side as well, which is great for when we get back in the pool. So I just do that, leaning into the stretch, and once I've done that for about 30 seconds, I just switch side and do it again. Obviously, if you don't have a band, you can do it without a band and just lean more into it and just make sure you get that stretch overhead. Similarly to Tom again, using the Theragun for quads. And what's great about the Theragun Pro is you can actually get an app on your phone. It means you can connect to the Theragun and actually gives you a sort of routine in which to do, which I found really useful for something to follow. You kind of just watch the app and it keeps you accountable for things that you've done and for parts that you've missed out, which is great. So I've been using this primarily on quads. I've connected to the app, and it also just shows you the pressure ranges that you should be working in, which is pretty good because sometimes I get a bit carried away and just think like, if I just really ram it into my quad, then that'll make me feel better, but not always the case. So it really does, it just helps you out using it really. So similarly to Tom, just turn that on, and I've just worked down the main area of the quad. If any bits are particularly tight, I just work on that, and then I'd also get up into the hip and down the IT band. And for me, that's great. Sometimes I find the massage can be, quite brutal, whereas this actually just loosens everything off and actually gives you a bit of area to work in rather than just keep hammering away at the quad. So yeah, those are my two main things really that I use, especially going from hard bike sessions back to back with hard run sessions. So yeah, they're probably my two main things. We'll just pull back in our seated area. Oh, we can do that.
So that was just talking about the quads. So as a runner, yes, quads are still really important. That's definitely that you can still implement into a run recovery as well. But as well at the same time, so the times that you'll be using your quads is typically when you're going to be going downhill. So that big stabilizing muscle, so just to keep everything going. So there's some really great tips there. So now moving on to the glutes, probably the biggest muscle that you use, certainly when you're climbing, and probably the most important when you're running. And you want to make sure that it's working as well as you possibly can during, because it's going to be providing so much of that power and so much of that force going through the legs, which actually then enables you to go up the hill or to run further, to run faster and to run longer. So for this, you can do 2 or 3 different things, and I typically like to do 3 depending on just how much time you've got. So firstly, with Theragun, I won't turn it on because it is a little bit noisy, just so you can hear me talking, but exactly the same principle, 60 seconds going into the glutes. So once you've turned it on, you can then sort of just really fire it, going around into the glutes, just keeping that nice swinging motion. 60 seconds on each side, and exactly the same with the calves and with the quads. What that's going to do is that's going to increase the blood flow to that area, which will just help really kick-start the recovery. You've had your protein, you've had some hydration, but now it's time to fill the body with fresh oxygen and then allow you to recover better. So once the Theragunning has been done, I'll then move on to a little bit of foam rolling. People generally don't like to foam roll on their glutes just because it is quite sore. And depending on how sensitive your glutes are, you can use different things. So for me, I just like to use a hockey ball. Really simple. You can get it from anywhere and can be quite cheap online. Or if you find one behind an AstroTurf, that's even better. So what I'll do is pop it on the floor, and then I'll get it right into my glute, and then just roll on it, following the glute along, sort of pivoting on it, putting as much weight as I can through it. Typically, I sort of hold this for between 60 to 90 seconds on each side. If there's a particular tender area, then I'll just balance on it, and I'll just stay just putting as much pressure through the ball and into my glute as I can. And what this is doing is just helping release any built-up tension you've got in your quad. In your glute, not in your quad. And yeah, it's, like I said earlier, it's such an important muscle for running. So once you've done one side, you can then switch on to the other side and do the same. So this in total with the ball should take somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes. Yes, it's not very pleasant, but like I said, it's such an important area to focus on. So then the third and final part of my glute work is a bit of a stretch. So a couple of different stretches you can do, and some will work better for others, depending on how flexible you are. So the first one, so probably the more beginner's one, is you cross your legs over, and then you can either just hug your glutes and pull it in to get a little bit more of a stretch. If you look over the opposite shoulder, so if I look away from you, then you just feel it activating a little bit more. And this is a really good stretch, just to sort of really target and to really stretch the glutes. If you're finding that that's a little bit easy, you can then progress on from that to different stretches. With the stretches, I like to hold them for somewhere between 45 seconds and a minute, and then either 1 or 2 on each side, depending on how tight I am. So another stretch you can do, or you can go on to progress on, is if you lie down, and then if you cross your legs over one another, and you can pull in the opposite leg, just like this, to get a really deep stretch. This is the one that I typically use, and I find it is really good. It really gets deep into your glutes, and then just really allows you to really target those areas to stretch. Same holding, so holding it for somewhere between 45 seconds and a minute, and that then just really gets your body to kickstart the recovery process. So you can then get back out on the trails and get running as soon as possible. So that's now finishing on the glutes. So what we're going to do now is we will put our chair back in. There we go. And we will just very briefly talk about sleep and sort of the final part of recovery that people sort of tend to overlook. So sleep is obviously incredibly important, and not necessarily the quantity of sleep, but the quality of sleep. And we've definitely got a couple of top tips for you to improve the quality of your sleep. So I say sort of my top 3 tips is to just be really aware of the amount of light that you're using before bed. So whether that's screens, you're using your phone, watching telly, and we'll try and turn all devices off about 45 minutes before we go to bed, which just really helps your body get relaxed and ready to go. My second recommendation would be just to have your bedroom as dark as possible. We've just got some blackout blinds, and they've been amazing, really useful, especially in the summer. Yes, the sun's amazing, but actually the quality of sleep is so important. And then the third tip is just being able to get to sleep quickly. So at the moment it's pretty hot, so whether that's to invest in a fan in your room to make it a bit cooler, or if you do have trouble getting to sleep, there are apps like Headspace that we've both been using, which do really help you get to sleep, and they also help you to sleep a little bit deeper. A lot of people will ask about sort of taking naps, and do we take naps or not? And like, yes, we do. Certainly in bigger training blocks, whether it's more intense or there's more volume for it, what we will do is tend to add an hour of sleep on every day. If it's not possible to get that at night, then we'll try and put it in the day. And my sort of top recommendation for sleep would be to sleep somewhere between 30 and 90 minutes on the big days. If it's not possible and you can just go for a little bit less, then it's still great just to get a little bit of extra sleep, which you should find really useful, and hopefully that will help you relax, and then at the end of the day get you to sleep a little bit better. Yes.
And one other thing, I obviously touched on nutrition earlier. We actually have an overnight protein. We don't use this all the time, but it's great because it's a slow release of protein, and it just means that you definitely have enough for when you're sleeping. And obviously, as Tom said, like when you sleep is the time when your body recovers the most. So making sure that you actually have some building blocks for your body to recover is super important. So like I said, we don't use this all the time. Mainly if we're around race season, we'd use it after races. So obviously that's a big intensity day. But also if we've got back-to-back hard sessions, we would use something like this just before we go to bed, either as a shake, but you can also put it in with things like yogurt and things like that. Just make sure, like I say, you've got enough building blocks when you go to bed. So they are our main top tips for recovery. A bit of obviously there about nutrition, a bit about sleep, and just our key exercises and mini routines that we do. There's obviously loads of other things that you can do, like sometimes we throw in yoga and mobility, things like that as well. So there are hundreds more things to do, and if you have any questions, like of course, shoot us a message and we'll hopefully get back to you.
Perfect. Hope you have enjoyed that. What we're going to do now is, so people asked some questions earlier on the Sports Shoes link, so we're going to answer a couple of those questions. We'll either both answer or just one, and then if anyone who is watching now has got any questions, now's the time to ask, and we'll hopefully have enough time to answer them at the end. So the first question was, so do you prefer recovery in the summer or the winter?
So I personally prefer it in the winter because there's like no distractions. I mean, in the summer, we're very fortunate, we've got dogs, we've got a garden. So I always find in between training I want to do stuff outside, whether that's bits in the garden, taking the dogs out. Whereas in the winter it's a bit more miserable and you don't really want to be going out. So I tend to find recovery is a lot easier in the winter with no distractions.
And so I would disagree. I much prefer recovery in the summer, because I like doing my recovery outside, so I can bring a mat outside and lie on the grass and just enjoy the sun, and your body's a little bit warmer, your muscles are warm, I tend to find a little bit more flexible, can recover a little bit better. But then also the summer does then pose more problems with nutrition, but more importantly with hydration, which then leads us on to our second question of hydration. How much should you drink? So Soph, what would you typically drink in a day?
I think my top tip for hydration is just to realise like how much you actually sweat out when you're training. Even if you go out for a half an hour easy jog, you'll be surprised at how much you actually lose. Especially if it's like, it's a bit of a windy day, the evaporation of it, you won't come in with a super wet top, but a load of it you will sweat out loads and it will evaporate off you. So what I'd say is before you go out for a run or a ride or anything like that, weigh yourself. Just quickly note it down, and then when you get back in, weigh yourself again. And obviously that, however much you lose, is what you've sweated out. And I think you've just got to remember that you need to replenish that, and you need to replenish a bit more. So whatever you lose, I'd kind of be like, you come back and you're a kilo lighter, okay, well that's a litre you need to replenish, plus half again. So litre and a half, put a hydro tab in that, and then that's one way that I'd try and make sure you kind of keep on top of hydration.
Yeah, and then, so another question for you is, what would your top tips be to someone who's been out of the pool for a little bit? How do they get back into the pool to stay injury free?
So I think that's a question that's been on a lot of people's minds at the moment. I've been out the water for 10 weeks and I've done 3 open water swim sessions in the last 10 days and I've already got tight shoulders. I think if you're coming back into an open water situation, you need to remember that when you're in the pool, especially if you're in a 25 metre pool, for every 25 metres you think you're swimming, you're actually only swimming 20 metres because of the turns. So if you're going straight back into open water, you're obviously not tumble turning, so you've then got that extra loading on your shoulders. You're probably going to be in a wetsuit, so that's also putting more load through your shoulders. And you've also got a sight as well, so every time you lift your head up, you're putting pressure back through your neck and shoulders. So I think there's a couple of things you can do around that. One is making sure that everything's nice and loose before you start, whether that's trigger pointing through traps and shoulders, stretching in a door frame, just making sure everything's like nice and loose before you get in. Some band activation, really simple, just a TheraBand, a few like activations all the way around, just to make sure everything's firing again, because they've probably not done a lot for like 10 weeks. And then when you get out, just make sure again you give everything a good stretch once you get out of the water. And hopefully if you do those things combined with a few shoulder health exercises in the week, like you should be able to get back into the water and build it up sensibly.
Perfect. So 2 questions left. So the penultimate one is, how often are we doing these recovery sessions and how long do they take? So for me, as it kind of a little bit on feel and also how much time you've got. We're both incredibly fortunate to be full-time athletes, so have got more time to do that recovery and to do those extra little bits of sessions. They don't necessarily have to take all the time in the world, so you can kind of use as much time as you've got. And if you haven't got long and you've just got 5 minutes to do. Actually, you can just do that in the shower, just a little bit of stretching before you get ready for whether it's going to work or it's whatever commitment that you've got next. How many times a day do I do it? If I'm running twice a day, I'll try and do a little bit before and after each session. That sort of just kind of keeps me loose, keeps me flexible, and also for me it's just a really nice way to switch on to training and also to switch off for training afterwards and know that I've got a little bit of time to relax after that session, and then yeah, I can then go on from there. And I found sort of the more time and more effort that I put into my recovery, the better I seem to perform, and the more injury-free that I hopefully stay. So the final question, which I will ask Soph, is what would you tell yourself now? What would, if you were in this position 6-7 years ago, what would be the key bit of advice that you'd tell yourself from your future self?
So there's probably two things. One is a bit on recovery and one is nothing to do with recovery. But I think the first thing that's not recovery related would be not to put too much pressure on yourself or get too het up on the one session in the week. I think when I was younger I used to get very focused on a session or a day of training, where actually I think as a full-time athlete you really need to look at the bigger picture. And I think that's advice for anyone, whether you're doing 5k park runs, whether you're training for your first marathon, whether you're whatever it is. I think you just need to look at the bigger picture, and actually if one day of training is not great, that's fine, because you still got out the door, you still got it done, and actually the last 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks of training have been great. So I think that'd be the first bit of advice to myself. And I think the second bit of advice would be to get on top of recovery before it becomes an issue. And even that, I'm still learning on that now. Like at the beginning of lockdown, went from being on the road to being on the turbo, and didn't put in place enough probably stretching and rolling and things like that, so started to pick up a little knee niggle, and at the beginning it was kind of a reaction rather than being proactive and stopping that happen, and I had to react to that. So yeah, definitely trying to be proactive in things rather than having to react, and yeah, even now still trying to learn my lessons on that one. So yeah,
I think that's really good advice, and at the end of the day, yes, we love sport, but your health is going to be the most important thing. So if you look after your body will look after yourself when you're out doing the things that you love. So from us here, thanks so much for tuning in. If you've got any questions about anything that we've covered during this time, then send us a message and we will do our very best to get back to you as quickly as possible. Yeah, once again, thanks for tuning in, and hope that you and your families stay safe and stay healthy during this time, and we both look forward to seeing you on the trails or at a start line near you in the near future.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.